Today I have the pleasure of doing another Nuts About Product LinkedIn Live. Today I've got Drew Rayman on with me today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dave Hannibal. I'm CPO. I run Corp Dev here for Squirro. One of the things that we've been really working on and focusing on is how to deliver better ROI to our customers, whether that's cost optimization, making you more efficient, or increasing the quality of your employees' experience with AI. That is really what Squirro is all about. So I brought Drew on today. Drew is co-founder and CEO of Cynthia. Cynthia is a AI Guardrails company. Guardrails is talk of the town. It is what everyone wants to talk and learn all about. And because of our focus, that third one being how to create a really better experience for your customers using AI, that's where Guardrails comes into play. So that's why I have Drew here today with me to join me to talk about, right now I've got 4 use cases up in the background, really talk about how can we create a better experience using AI for customers, for internal employees, etc. So want to just start things off by turning it over to Drew. Drew, just quick intro on yourself, about the company, what your mission is, where you guys are really focused, and let's kind of start there.
Perfect. Thanks, Dave. Meet Cynthia started from it started small. It was an idea that AI wasn't delivering accurate, reliable results. And so we asked a simple question of the machine. We said, why are sales down in the Northeast? And it answered. And we knew a year and a half, 2 years ago, that type of interaction wasn't going to work. And so we went all in on finding ways to make AI more accurate. And what we found is, and it started with the brand, actually. My background is I come from a digital agency background. I started digital agencies back in the day, marketing. And, when I was using AI to try to create communications, right? Corporate communications, marketing, sales decks, any kind of marketing or communications for a company, the output from AI was poor at best, and it took a lot of human intervention to get it good. And some of the tweaks that I noticed was working were things like adding context to the machine itself. And so we spent a lot of time breaking down what would make AI more reliable in its responses. And so one thing we did is we created this thing called Guardrails. And this was very early. Excuse me. I'm getting text messages here. I'm sorry. And this was early on. And what we did is we added role perspective, performance, governance, all of the things that make AI more valuable. And we built these guardrails. And there's 2 types of guardrails. This is what trickled out, Dave. We have guardrails that enhance the question, and we have guardrails that validate the output. And all it takes is those two types of guardrails to get very, very close to zero hallucination, perfectly accurate information that you can track. And so what you do is you basically, everything you can about the employee, and you stack the question that they're asking in a very humanistic way, and you make the prompt better, right? And just by making the prompt better, you can get 50 to 70% better responses, more accurate responses. So that's good. And then when the machine, when the LLM spits out an answer, you check it, you validate it with another guardrail. So there's profanity guardrails, there's compliance guardrails, there's brand guardrails, there's thousands of guardrails that you can create. And it's our intention is to make them as powerful as possible, to allow the enterprise to simply create guardrails based on that person's role, that person's responsibilities, and it works. So like one of the first instances of this was on brand, right? So we wanted AI to speak in the language of our brand. And so we created this thing called a brand key, which is simply a brand guardrail. And it broke things down into attributes, right? 17 attributes. This is what my brand is about: mission, vision, values, you name it. And every time we generated AI generated content, we added a guardrail. And the responses were 5 times better every time, no matter what. And you can say, well, that's like training an LLM. And you're right, that's what
Mm.
it's like. But it's doing it on the fly with every request. And the
Yeah.
cool thing about that is, I'll finish here and then we can talk, is when you're able to build a guardrail and put it in, you can you could do anything with it. You can look at content that was already posted, and you can then say, okay, here's a speech given by our CEO that's very long, and we want to make sure that it's on brand and compliant. Please check that. You build a governance guardrail and a brand guardrail. You run it through the machine just like you normally would, and it won't
Yeah.
change the very nature of the. It'll give you 20 suggestions to fix things, and they're usually very, very good. So
Hmm.
guardrails work. Guardrails work, and
Yeah.
that's why everyone's talking about it. That's why they're talking about it. And we thought it was a brand thing, but I had a friend in legal at a major bank, and she was like, "Why can't I use that to guardrail my employees' interactions with AI?"
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
exactly what.
and that's exactly where, from Squirrel's perspective, we think about this. We're seeing, a large uptick in Gen AI enterprises being used, the Gen AI enterprise platform being used to do things like conversational AI. So how do I enable, as a large enterprise, my customer to have a better experience with me? Well, what you don't want to do is you don't want to have an unguardrailed conversation. Sure, these LLMs like 4.0 and Llama, et cetera, have the basic kind of elements, right? Racism, sexism, things like that. But what happens when, oh, you're a US financial institution and you have to be FINRA compliant, which means no AI advice, right? And sure, Llama will get better with time, or OpenAI will get better with time, and maybe incorporate some elements of those, but how do you ensure you're steering your audience to the right place? Or how do
This
you ensure
becomes,
that,
I
like,
gotta add on that. This becomes like a
sure.
trust, right? You can have a 1,000 page document. Financial institutions have know your customer, or you
Hmm.
name whatever the complexity of it is, charts and graphs, and 1,000 pages to remain compliant. And if you rely on an LLM to go into that and find the right information, if you trust that it's doing it, well, your trust will be sadly mistaken, because it will inevitably have errors. So what all a guardrail is a short set of instructions for the LLM. It's a reminder. These are the things
Yep.
that matter most, right? We break it into attributes. And we're this is the frontier for us. This is like the Wild West. How many attributes are too much? When does LLM get bored and just forget it and start making stuff up? No one
Hmm.
knows. So we know that between one attribute and 20 attributes are pretty powerful. And so some of them might be like I do with brand guardrails, 15 work, and then suddenly you start getting better results.
Yeah.
So this is what we're learning as we start implementing more and more. On compliance side, one thing might really matter, 15 things might really matter. So
Hmm.
you've got to ingest that based on the person's role, what their job is, what makes them better. And
Yeah.
so a lot of people say, well, what's the difference between agents and guardrails, right? You have an agent. Um, an agent, it is the distinction is between the human interaction, right? The human workforce. Agents and bots, they operate in isolation a little bit, right? They're designed to execute a task, right? Guardrails, on the
Hmm.
other hand, are very they work with employees, they empower employees, they make them better. They're not necessarily replacing them. But
Yeah.
what we've learned is from building guardrails, the last thing I'll say about that is guardrails are excellent at educating bots and agents, right? Because you've already
Hmm.
codified a set of instructions that matter to these folks, right? So you can use guardrails in the creation of agents and bots too. The goal here is what the reason we were attracted to Squirro is we're all in on accuracy and reliability. This idea of dependability and trust is everything that matters to us. So if an employee trusts it, we often say AI doesn't help your business, right? It helps your employees, and they'll help your business, right? So we're all in on the employee first AI thing. That to me is where
Hmm.
the benefit is going to come from. An ethical, powerful way to adopt certain guardrails to help employees become much more productive. That's
Yeah.
really what it boils down to.
Yeah, that touches on a good point, which is, so how does this work, right? And to me, this is the really cool part, which is, as a individual, right? Say I'm deploying knowledge management internally, or I'm deploying customer service externally. Use cases that Squirro is really focused on delivering out there in the market today. You want to make sure, let's run with brand, for example. You want to make sure that it stays on brand. Your marketing department, whether it's just internal for your large enterprise, like I was talking with some folks earlier this week on, where it's not even conversational AI. How do I ensure that externally, my voice is my organization? Like I always use car companies, right? How does the voice of Porsche differ than the voice of, say, Lamborghini? Well, they're very different, right? Everything about them is very different in terms of them. How do you ensure that if you deploy conversational AI, it stays to the right point? You made the great analogy or detail about what's the voice, what's the mission, right? And so being able to stitch all of that in and make it easy for large enterprises to go, my internal stakeholder needs to become more efficient, i.e., my internal employee, or I want to have a better conversation externally. They just are going to put in a question, right? Like in this example, what is Squirro? And then behind the scenes, it all has to get stitched in, right? So it has to get flagged and say, hey, this prompt needs a guardrail. Don't forget. And then go off to Cynthia and layer that in. And then also coming back and say, hey, all right, now the LLM generated the response. Let's make sure that what the response is that got generated is still correct, right?
I
And
love
this is
that.
where you get a lot of scale because, like the guys I was talking to earlier this week, they know they have to be on brand internally. It is
Yep.
not a question. It's just extra steps that got added to every single process. And if you can take all those extra steps that are really tied to, just little handful of pockets of teams who have to monitor it and instead automate it through AI guardrails, well, now all of a sudden the ROI, the efficiency gain, the quality of your employee, it goes through the roof because now what you're doing is you're saying, hey, we're going to help you find you're going to get to the right answers from the right data at the right time to solve your problem. But oh, by the way, don't worry, because that big process that is compliant, that ensures being on brand, you're now covered, but it's all automated. So the efficiency gain of AI isn't just about finding the right answer at the right time. The efficiency gain is about putting guardrails around it so that answer comes back on brand or in a compliant way and really delivers. And to me, that is the holistic kind of story I see that really makes a big difference.
So
So
one
appreciate
of
you
the
pointing out where you fit, and then hopefully that this
yeah,
visual also helps to take it to the
this
next step too.
the two things. This idea of we help employees ask the right questions, right? That's a key thing. Like, how much
Hmm.
prompt engineering are they going to have to learn as this technology spins past everybody, right? Are they going to be able to keep up? The answer is no, but they won't need to. Like when
Yeah.
you searching with Google, you thought you needed to know everything, but Google took care of it. That's what Guardrails does. We make sure that employees are asking the right question by adding context, and then we validate the answer. Here's two things that every company will be concerned about over the next 2 years. Guaranteed. One, consideration. What data is being considered when I have to answer these questions that employees are asking?
Hmm.
Who is guarding or watching the consideration? That's the beauty of Squirro with their RAG system. They have knowledge graphs, they have semantic search, they know exactly, right? And so they know how to consider the right data, and guardrails is just one more answer in the tool bag.
Yeah.
And besides consideration, which is critical, is obeyance, right? That the LLM obeys the directives of these instructions. And
Hmm.
Squirro, the reason we chose Squirro was for that. There's no one better at making sure that the LLM delivers answers, obeys the instructions that they were given so that you can trust it. And once you have trust with an employee, that's when the productivity gains explode. And there's still a lot of talk about we're not there yet. So
Right.
I think Squirrel is there, and I think that's going to make a major difference. I think for integrating and adopting AI into the enterprise.
So I think that's great, and that also segues us into really the last thing I want to kind of touch on before maybe we'll show this thing off for real, which is okay. So we've talked about AI guardrails. We've talked about how to us at our AI guardrails really means our investment into Meet Cynthia, which obviously we announced, and how now customers can layer that on. So want to just kind of touch on how do people get their hands on this, right? How does one benefit? And I think that's a great place that we can kind of finish. And I've got a couple points, and then I'll hand it over to you, Drew. But the way we kind of think about it from the Squirrel perspective is traditionally someone comes in and says, I need the enterprise Gen AI platform. I want to then take that platform from Squirrel. I choose my own LLM. I bring all of my data to the table, and then Squirrel's platform ingests that, parses it, structures it, maybe adds on via the enhanced RAG it going into the knowledge graph, or maybe it then adds on different elements here to then be able to get my end users hands on keyboard to start having either a conversation or searching using all of that great tooling and tech that Squirrel provides to drive clear return on investment to the business in those three ways that I noted all the way at the beginning of this session. So that being said, where our customers can fit in here, what does this mean for them? For us, it's all about saying, hey, when you're rolling out Squirro and you're saying, hey, I need to go from I have lots of data with lots of users who need to find that data, and you want to move from I got lots of users who can instantly find the right data they need at the right time to answer their problem, you may need other elements. And we know you most likely need other elements. And certain use cases need more or less, right? And so these are those enhanced RAG elements we see that we really believe our customers and the market is saying they're going to need to add on. So Drew, you mentioned graph. Yes, graph greatly increases the accuracy of your answer. But where AI guardrails fits in is another enhancement. And it's really important to be able to literally just say, hey, as I'm deploying this, because this is going to be external facing for, say, customer service, or I'm a very large enterprise and we have compliance, we have an understanding of brand, we need to literally just like that, add on that guardrail element. And that's where that fits in. And we've tried to make this as easy as possible for people to adopt by literally connecting it into our underarching Gen AI framework where someone can just add this in with really without blinking, essentially, right? And so they can add that right into their contract. They can then roll this out. And then what we've done is we've made this really easy to use for the marketing team, for example, to create their brand key guardrails. And so that's really what I wanted to just kind of end on here is how do people drive the adoption and how do we see it? And we've tried to break down as many barriers. Anything I forgot to add on before we do a demo?
Well, I think demo's great. I just want to mention one thing, which I think Squirrel
Sure.
and guardrails are most important about is risk or de-risking an operation, right? So we know who's asking questions. I mean, it better be your employees, but we have to be honest about who's answering the questions. Cynthia does not answer any questions. She's never been built to answer a question. She will never answer a question. But what she does is I think equally as important is that she puts context into the question being asked, and then she validates the answer. But the magic of answering a question that happens on the Squirrel side has all of these protective elements you just mentioned.
Hmm.
So I mean, how many steps do you have to take till you get to 0% hallucination? How much attribution do you have to show to say that this data is coming from exactly here within your lake of information? Right. And so I think the coolest thing about what we're doing together here is we're saying the best way to get to zero hallucinations and the best way to get to trustworthy, 100% accurate information is to stop allowing AI to guess or to dream those answers. I mean, it could be creative. You don't lose any of the world's knowledge, but people, the risk thing is holding people back. How do you de-risk it? How do you make people, unafraid that their data isn't being shared to educate LLM for their competitor? The way you do that is you get a Squirrel that keeps data private, you guardrail it, and then you allow in safety, in trust, in reliability, you allow your employees loose on it. And there's a
Yeah.
study that came out. I don't know if anyone saw it. We should post this. It shows that low performers with AI become high performers, and that high performers become like geniuses, right? And the people that don't use AI, even if they're high performers, the low performers will outpace them with AI.
Hmm.
So you've got to find a way to open up those floodgates in an ethical, reliable, dependable way. I think this is the answer.
Yeah. No, look, we're seeing it. It's really fun to demo all of this stuff because, you know, LLMs will hallucinate, right? At their core, this whole world, let's be honest here, the whole world of AI, all of it, it is probabilistic at its core,
Yep.
right? If it was deterministic, well, it'd be essentially an ETL pipeline at the end of the day if it was deterministic, right? It
Yep.
reminds me of the old Planet Fitness commercial. I pick things up, I put them down, right? Like that's it. It's nothing
Yep.
more. But it's
Yep.
not. And that's why we use it, is because it can do things that the deterministic world of programming cannot do. But our goal and our focus is to say, okay, yes, it is probabilistic. There is always a chance for hallucination. But by using guardrails, by using graph, by deploying a privacy layer to remove PII, by bringing in, say, a semantic data layer to go after all your operational data and using agents, we can take the probabilistic chance of not getting the right answer and get it as close to zero as we possibly can. Will you ever get at exact zero? No, because
Because
then you're not AI anymore, but you
you
can get
guys
as close as you can, and that's the fun part of all
you're
of
on the
this.
same quest as we are, which is this,
Yeah.
like Sting said, this finding the probable cause of a perfectly accurate outcome. This is the quest that we're on, and these are the tools that we use, and it's working.
Yeah, exactly. So now let me hop over, and one of my tabs I have a demo pulled up.
See it? Yep.
All right, you can see my screen. Cool. All right, great. So let me start by just refreshing to make sure I'm still logged in. Great. Cool. All right. So what I wanted to just kind of do, and for the sake of time, we'll get to the punchline. Instead of talking about how the sausage gets made, let's just talk about the outcome. But really what happens is your marketing team, your compliance team, etc., comes in here and they can build guardrails, right? So through Cynthia, through this UI, it is super easy to just build and assemble a guardrail. This is a guardrail management system, right? This is where we do all of the building. Once it's built, and again, and we make it very easy. You just go in, you can add your guardrails, you could grab it. You can then come in, and what you can then do is then you go back into Squirro and you can then use those guardrails. So let me click on one that I think is really interesting. And I'm going to use this one, Drew, because you highlighted it already,
Yep.
which is what happens when I grab a speech off the internet, right? And say, okay, how can I grab a speech off the internet that just kind of points at a particular topic, right? Which is, hey, how can this align to the brand key of my organization? Okay. This is all public information. There's nothing private in this. All I'm saying is, hey, um, here's something that was said, right? In this case by the ECB, and really, again, it's just out there. I think this came off of a blog post they had written, and then what I said was, okay, but where can this be improved? Give specific examples, bold the differences, etc. Right? And again, what did I do to create that? All I did was I went on ECB's website, grabbed a bunch of data from them that talked about their mission, their value, how do they believe what they believe, right? Again, this is all just right off their website. And then what's really cool here is then it says, okay, here's your original, like this is what was said, but let me now give you the improvement, right? And then because it bolds it, you can start to see what it did, right? And it finds all of these little ways in here that says, hey, you were really close, right? And again, this comes off the ECB website. So you know they should be like almost perfect,
Yep.
right? It's not like me, Dave Hannibal, saying, hey, as Dave Hannibal, here's what I would say if I was at the ECB, and I'd probably be way off, right? This is literally off of their website. And so it then highlights and says, oh, by the way, here's all the different ways to improve. And what's so cool about this example is, and I could have done this for the Federal Reserve too, but I just chose
Do
the
it for
ECB.
anybody. Yeah.
Right. But just like in the US, given you and I are both American, just like in the US, as Americans, we watch the semantics, the exact words coming out of the Fed minutes. So do our European counterparts do the same thing with the ECB. And so if you think about it in that mentality, where we all monitor what Jerome Powell says to the nth degree of his semantics, and everyone reads the tea leaves and it moves the market dramatically, look at the power of using AI guardrails for brand key and how it fixed things, how it changed things for the better to stay on brand in the most critical, the most important organization in all of Europe for the financial services space, just like if I pulled this off the Fed Reserve website and it found it. And so to me, that is super cool. It really shows the power where semantics matter, where keywords really matter. This isn't, Dave Hannibal's cool side hustle LLC where I'm just tossing it on a website, right? Like this is the most, essentially one of the top three most important regulators out there in financial services. So it's the most critical, and yet it was able to find it.
And
And
by the
this is
way, let me just add
important.
something.
Yeah.
This is a human in the loop answer right here, right? It's like, okay, if you don't agree with some of this, fantastic. But if we catch one thing that you think could be improved, you win, right? And that's why the most heavily regulated industries are flocking to Squirro and guardrails, is because, you know, you catch one thing that really isn't appropriate. It's a very important opportunity for
Hmm.
de-risking your operational and organizational risk. That's what it
Yeah.
does. Yep.
Exactly. And so given, I know we're a couple of minutes over on time for today, but I really wanted to make sure we highlighted this, and I know I labored the point on why semantics matter, but to me it's something in now demoing this a bunch, especially in the last 2 weeks. This is the most critical element. And so I really wanted to belabor the point here and make sure we touched on it. Not that, say, being able to do compliance isn't important, right? And I've got an example of this where it's like, hey, I put in a prompt, the prompt's, pushing me, I want to push in a certain direction, and it comes back and hits a compliance guardrail. That is important. But, given everyone's talking about the financial markets, because everyone's kind of looking at this stuff, wanted to just kind of highlight the power of it with this example. So just to kind of wrap up and conclude, Drew, I think this was super helpful to have you on today to kind of talk about the importance of AI guardrails, talk about how we can go after this. There were a couple of slides that I had thought I had in the background. I'm not sure if that part worked, but we can always send those out after the fact. But really, thank you for coming on. Thank you for being here today. I really appreciate the partnership. And it's great to continue to work together again. So love
Great.
that.
Thank you, and thank Squirrel for their faith in this. I think we're pioneering something that really will have a tremendous value.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.